Hello and welcome. 103 years ago, in 1919, Australian Prime Minister William Alexander Watt announced the Commonwealth Government would offer a prize of £10,000 for the first successful flight to Australia from Great Britain in under 30 days. This started the Great Air Race, which would eventually be won by two brothers, Ross and Keith Smith, in their Vickers Vimy aircraft. They landed in Darwin on the 10th of December 1919, taking just 28 days from the UK. Darwin was not their final destination. That was far to the south, a distance equal to 20% of their journey so far. The dreaded rainy season was approaching. Their Rolls-Royce Eagle engines required a major overhaul, having already done 147 hours. On the instructions of London-based organisers, Hudson Fysh and Paul McGuinness were sent to explore a route around the north of Australia, and they made an epic journey from Burketown, basically along the Gulf of Carpentaria, to Katherine. The journey effectively proved that this route for the Smith brothers was quite impractical. A route from the railhead at Cloncurry to Newcastle Waters was much preferable. This route had been suggested by Dr. Griffith Taylor, who had lectured at the Academy at Point Cook during 1918. The route had been explored by a group organised by Reginald Lloyd, a businessman who in January 1919 had proposed the establishment of an airline to Britain. Only a few members of this expedition, mounted on Indian motorcycles, had reached Darwin on August 2, 1919. It was decided to send an aircraft from Point Cook to test out the route to Darwin. Time was pressing. Ross and Keith Smith were in Italy en route to Darwin. On the 16th of November, pilot Captain Henry Wrigley with pilot mechanic Lieutenant Arthur Murphy set off from Point Cook in a Royal Aircraft Factory BE-2E. The obsolescent pre-war design aircraft was fitted with an extra fuel tank and carried a number of spare parts. The pilots followed railway lines, rivers and other landmarks, the basic information they needed to navigate. When they left Melbourne, they had no map of the Northern Territory, but Captain McGuinness met them at Cloncurry and supplied them with a somewhat out-of-date and misleading map, the only one available, and the information he had gathered in travelling overland by motor car. They reached Darwin after 2,500 miles on the 12th of December 1919 after a flight time of 46 flying hours, giving an average speed of around 80 kilometres per hour. This was 2 days after the Smith brothers' arrival. Thus they became the first pilots to make a transcontinental flight across Australia. Their handwritten survey notes provided the information that the Smith brothers would need to navigate southwards. Australian Henry Wrigley was born in 1892 and was an early graduate from the Central Flying School, Point Cook. In September 1917, he went to England with 3 Squadron RAAF and flew RE-8 aircraft on reconnaissance missions over the Western Front. He was awarded a Distinguished Flying Cross for exceptional devotion to duty, citing a particular very successful bombing attack near Ors, France on the 29th of October 1918, in which he flew at very low level in the face of intense enemy machine gun and rifle fire. When the Royal Australian Air Force was formed on the 31st of March 1921, Wrigley became one of the service's original 21 officers. He had a long and distinguished career, culminating in his appointment as Air Vice Marshal in 1941 and appointed CBE that year. He is respected as a theorist and historian of air power, his most important work being The Decisive Factor Air Power Doctrine, published in 1979. Arthur Murphy was born in 1861 and trained at Point Cook as air mechanic. He trained as a pilot in Egypt with the Royal Flying Corps and in 1918 served with the Australian Flying Corps in Palestine. He also was awarded the DFC and also the Hejaz Order of Nahada, reflecting his role in supporting the irregular Hejaz forces associated with T.E. Lawrence. He joined the Royal Australian Air Force after its formation in 1921. He continued in technical and flying roles, making several pioneering flights, including a formation flight around Australia in 1927. He was associated with the build-up of the RAAF prior to World War II, including the manufacture of the Wirraway and the Beaufort. This work continued during the war and he reached the rank of Air Commodore in 1943, a striking achievement for a man who had enlisted as a trainee air mechanic. His contribution to aviation was recognised by his election as a Fellow of the Royal Aeronautical Society. Ross Smith wrote in his book 14,000 Miles Through the Air, "The day we left Port Darwin, Captain Wrigley and Lieutenant Murphy of the Australian Flying Corps arrived from Melbourne in an old BE-2E machine. They had come up to meet us and had achieved a remarkable performance in having flown so far in a machine 4 years old." Ross Smith outlined an itinerary that put the brothers in Sydney within a week. The route across Australia was the part of a voyage that he knew least about, so he was greatly helped by the knowledge which Captain Wrigley was able to give him. The Vimy's flight across Australia was not as easy as Ross had hoped. There can be no doubt that as well as being an amazing achievement, Wrigley and Murphy's flight had a considerable effect on the Smiths' flight and on Australian aviation history. Wrigley and Murphy's flight is not well known, but it proved that air travel in the Australian outback was a viable form of transport. Their aircraft was allocated to the Australian War Museum, but unfortunately was destroyed in a fire at the Melbourne Aquarium in 1947. Thank you for watching. Please comment, like and subscribe to promote content.